All right. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Roscoe's Wetsuit Podcast. I am your host, Toby Passman. On the show with me today, I have a special guest. We have Zach Schleien. Zach is the co-founder of the video speed dating app Filter Off. Filter Off has been featured in publications such as the New York Times, BBC, and ABC. Prior to Filter Off, he ran and sold the dating blog Top Romp, which covered dating hacks and apps for the millennial dater. His passions lie in technology, health, and creating authentic connections. Zach, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
So tell me about Filter Off. What kind of inspired you to start it, and then kind of tell me a little how it kind of differs and is unique amongst the dating apps.
Yeah, sure. So, been working on Filter Off for about 2 years, so before the pandemic. And it really stemmed from my love of online dating and the ability to connect people through technology in a romantic sense, that where you may have never been able to meet them before, like outside your friend circles and things of that nature. But I realized online dating was extremely inefficient, super inauthentic, and just like downright broken. And I mean, when you think about it, when you're like swiping on a dating app, it takes a while. You finally get a match, and then you message them, they may not respond. But if they do respond, maybe the conversation just dies out very quickly. Or maybe then you get their phone number and nothing happens. And then let's say it works out, you meet them, you schedule the date, you meet them in person, you may quickly realize you have zero chemistry with them. So it's a very long funnel from the beginning of swiping or browsing to finally meeting. And that's why people are on dating apps, is to meet people and potentially date, and go from there. So it's a very inefficient process. And from there, probably 3-4 years ago, I started asking my dates beforehand if they'd be open to FaceTiming before meeting in person. And I felt that was a really efficient and authentic way to date. And unfortunately, most women would say no. I would say about a third would say yes. And then some would say, hey, could we just jump on a phone call instead? Which is better than just texting, but you don't get the idea of like what they look like, their mannerisms. So it's still not as authentic and effective as FaceTiming. And I wanted to create the app I always wanted to use, and that's where Filter Off, how it was born. And it's really a video first speed dating app that offers virtual events as well as a matchmaking service, and available for iOS and Android. And yeah, so that's kind of the story behind it.
Right on. So this probably, I mean, so this was already, you already had this video service available kind of before, prior to all COVID hitting. So that must have been something that took off even more, I would assume,
Yeah. I
amongst
mean,
your
we got out of
service.
beta 1 month before the pandemic, and then it really took off in April when we got covered by the BBC and then the New York Times. And we've had a lot of these big milestones. We just got #1 on Product Hunt. So every big milestone is like big influx of users and word of mouth. It's a great product. So it's yeah,
Right on.
expanding, spreading.
One interesting thing, I was just having a conversation with a buddy of mine about just the dating apps and kind of the differences between, for a dating app,
Mhm.
being used by a man versus a woman, and how it's completely drastically different. Do you
Mhm.
sort of like encounter the same thing like with Filter Off?
Like in terms of based off gender. So I mean, I
Yeah,
think
like in
yeah.
terms of like oftentimes, with the classic dating apps, right? Like where the, women get a ton of matches and then, oftentimes like guys don't get the message, get a message back,
Yeah.
it's a lot of ghosting.
Yeah, I mean, our app is fundamentally different. It's a different way of online dating. There is no swiping. So you opt into an event, whether it's location based or interest based, and the dates get sent to you. So you have these like blind kind of dates where the photo is blurred, but you can see their fun facts and bio, and then you hop on the date. So the experience is the same for men and women. And then our matchmaker service, you're sent dates based off of your compatibility, or like your perfect score, your perfect match. It's very curated, and you could see their photo beforehand. So that experience is identical, for men and women. So it's kind of apples and oranges, because when you're using a swipe app as a woman, whether you're on Bumble, Tinder, Hinge, OkCupid, whatever, you're going to be on, especially OkCupid, you're going to get sent so many messages. Tinder, you'll only know if you have a match when you swipe right, like any of the other ones. And the likelihood of you getting a match as a woman is much higher than as a man on these other apps. The statistic is about 10% for women and like 0.7% for men, for like a like.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I had been talking to my buddy about.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
right. So what specifically, you mentioned kind of being a fan of this kind of, dating through apps or online dating. What do you think really separates it? I think you mentioned that, being able to meet people that you might otherwise not be exposed to. But what are some of the other advantages you think of, kind of this method of dating?
Of online dating in general.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's convenient, right? Like you could be in your home, whatever app you choose to use to meet people. Um, you could be on a vacation and meet people and date when you're traveling. There's just it's kind of like the sky is the limit when it comes to bringing people together. However, there are obviously some downsides, right? Like it is a very different experience being on the street and stopping someone on the street or at a bar or any type of social interaction, or you're attending an event and you meet someone like-minded and you start dating. Like, that is a different experience, and it's a different muscle that you're using, and it takes a little bit of energy to go about that. So you could also say it has damaged in some ways, like that muscle, because you don't really have to rely on it when you can just online date. So I mean, there's definitely pros and cons to both.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Do you feel that, kind of some of that just ability to start an interaction, with a stranger, that's kind of seems to be lost nowadays or diminished,
Yeah.
with the ability to date online.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely you could use as a crutch, but I think it's still important to try to meet people if you are single, to meet people in person, because it is a special experience, um, to stop someone and compliment or acknowledge in like an appropriate manner. Because it gets your like, it's an exciting experience. Like your adrenaline goes up, and even if you get rejected, it's a great thing to practice. Like it's the same muscle that as you would use if you saw someone that you really wanted to approach that business related, or someone on the street that you want to say hello to, because you never know what it could lead to, whether in this sense it's romantic, but the same sense of like business, trying to, like, you may stop someone, just you see them at a bar, they look interesting, you start talking to them, and it could turn into a business deal. Like you never know what could lead to, and it also depends on like what city you are. And I'm in Manhattan. That's the beautiful thing about Manhattan is, you never know who you may meet. So whether it's a romantic sense or just based off connection.
Right. So one of the things I had seen on just the podcast guest page was about, kind of, do you feel that kind of the swiping traditional dating apps are can cause like sort of adverse mental health effects?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of studies. Yeah, I'm not a doctor, but or sociologist, but there are a lot of studies out there. They've done them on swiping apps, and I was reading a study, and I spoke to the individual who put out the study, and it was basically how like Grinder, so it's LGBTQ app, how that basically like leads oftentimes to like depression, and it's these like dopamine rushes, and that's what all traditional dating apps use, similar to being on like an Instagram or even Facebook with a like or a message, a comment. um yeah, so you're always trying to get that like, you're always trying to get that match, always trying to get that message, always trying to get that photo if you're on certain apps. So yeah, and it leads to this like crash as well, and feeling super lonely and disconnected. And like, without being a doctor or a like a PhD. Like you could think about or your listeners, like think about on your own, like when you feel like you have unlimited people that you could potentially connect with, yet you feel super alone or super, disconnected. And I think it's that inability that the traditional dating app has to really create that authentic connection that I think Filter Off does a great job with by being face to face on video. It's a different experience being face to face, even if you don't like them. It's a different experience than if you're swiping on someone. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and that might be interesting to talk a little more about that as far as like what are the sort of things that you might be able to sense. I think you mentioned like mannerisms, that you could sense by actually interacting with someone, through a video compared to if you're just texting or just swiping, whatever. So what are some of the other kind of advantages to doing this sort of video
Yeah,
dating?
I think a big one is, right, like you don't know who that person actually is on the other side of the profile. I'm not trying to like scare people, but like you don't know their actual age. Like anyone could lie about their age on any of these apps, or lie about what photos they're using, or just, but also just like how they laugh, how they sound just by speaking. Like sometimes you may meet someone, you're like, this is not someone's voice like the voice isn't pleasant to me, and it's not someone I could see myself being around all the time. It's these small little things as well. And just, and again, like I said, just their photos could be misleading, filters, hence the name Filter Off. But yeah, I mean, I think, and the phone is better than texting because at least you have audio, but the inclusion of visual as well, of using face-to-face video chat, um, is the most authentic, right behind meeting in person. But meeting in person is not always the most efficient because then you have to do your makeup if for many women, or drive or take public transport. It's a time commitment to go, as well as an opportunity cost. You could have been on another date or hanging out with friends or family. So it's that ability of like that sweet spot of efficiency and authenticity. And I think that's kind of where video lies. And it's video first. Like there's a lot of apps now that are adding a video component as a feature post match, but you're still swiping. It's still the same, looking at the profile. Oh, this guy is balding a little bit this way, this, like, but when you meet someone, a lot of that bias goes out the window because they have a certain energy that you're really attracted to, or something about them you really love. And you're like, wow, this is someone I want to potentially have a longer chat with, a longer conversation with, that a swipe or a text you can't get.
Right. Right. Um, so what are with filter off, kind of what have been some of your experiences as far as like, what do you find makes people compatible, as far as are there different sort of things through the app that they people specifically put in that results in them kind of getting paired?
Yeah, so our events, like I said, so they're location based as well as interest based. And the preferences we take into account is like age preference as well as gender interest. So like just the basics. But our matchmaker service takes into account many preferences to give you curated dates. So ethnicity, religion. Then we also have preferences like that we're going to be rolling out in the next 4 weeks, probably 2 to 4 weeks. Do you like sports? Do you like video games? Because a lot of these things are really important to people. Like if you're a big Yankees fan, a big baseball fan, you want your date to also be a big baseball fan potentially, because you want to have shared interests. And that's why it's super important. And that's why we also have these like interest-based events. So we've actually had events such as like Yankees and Mets night. So women and men who are both Yankees or Mets fans can date one another. And then we've also had events such as runners lovers. So people that love to run can meet one another. So like-minded interests. And that's really important to us. And then we also have organizations that run events on Filter Off. So we have Jewish organizations that run events, media companies that run events. So it's a way for like-minded individuals or like-minded singles to come together that have these similar shared passions. So yeah, that's what we've seen that works when it comes to dating from like a high level.
Right. That's really cool that you do events because I feel like, oftentimes like a first date could be very boring, over coffee or something where, you're being able to interact with the person, but you're not necessarily having fun. It seems like there's definitely something to doing some kind of event where there's opportunities to actually, do activities and have some fun.
So they're, just to clarify, so they are still speed dates, but they're under the guise of this is for people that love to run, or this is for
I
people that
see.
are sports fans. And they're short dates for events. Like most of the events, if they're public, they're very short, like 100 seconds. If they're more private events, like by organizations, they're typically 3 to 5 minutes, and they're short for a reason. Because if you have a really like a match that isn't someone you want to video chat with, you don't want a long date. So, and then you could always video chat with them later. So, but yeah, it's important, I think, to have that like theme. And we're planning to add like in-app games, things like that to make it also, I think it's super important. Like you hit the nail on the head to make it more interactive, aside from just pure communication one-on-one, but do an activity together. So that's something we're going to be rolling out as well.
Very cool. Switching gears a little bit, can you tell me a little about 18%?
Yeah, so I also run a mental health online nonprofit. I launched that after I had a close family friend who had so he had bipolar and schizoaffective disorder, and he was diagnosed at 19. And 3 years later, he went for a walk and didn't come home. And I ended up raising a significant amount of money, donated to NAMI, which is a nonprofit, and then started this online community with another co-founder of mine.
So it's basically an online mental health community. I've seen it. So it's based off of Slack.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So people, what's kind of the advantage to going through that service or having it? I assume is that mostly a messaging format compared to talking on the phone?
Yeah, so first of all, it's free, which our audience definitely skews younger, but it is all ages. So a lot of times, teens they may reach out to the crisis text line. The goal of the crisis text line is to de-escalate. But if they're just looking for like someone to connect with, um, 18% is a great platform, a great resource for them, because you have like your user, you could be as anonymous as you like, and you connect with people and you go in, you ask how your day is going. Maybe you're struggling one day, and then you have a crowd, a community to support you. We do have moderators, but no one is a healthcare professional. It's all peer to peer. And yeah, so it's really just a way to get support and support others.
Very cool. So the moderator basically is kind of just looking over so people on this community are just kind of interacting with one another, and the moderator is just kind of overseeing the whole
Yeah, the
interaction.
moderators just keep a pulse. It's less about less about like policing, but it's more about, hey, if people have questions, if there's requests for new channels. I mean, they do have the ability to delete messages or give warnings or ban users if need be. But yeah, so moderators just kind of overlook everything, keep a pulse on the community.
Sure, sure. So I wanted to ask you, kind of, it's interesting that you kind of have both of these kind of digital services going, in a time such as, now with COVID, and then going forward in the future. How do you see kind of, both mental health care along with sort of the, dating, virtual dating? How do you kind of see that progressing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the stigma around mental health will continue to diminish, and it'll be spoken about more and more in all places, including like where you work, and there'll be more resources. I think what it comes down to a lot of times is like accessibility. I mean, Obviously, costs that can be an issue for many people, but I think just an increase in accessibility with all different sorts of mediums, whether that's online or teletherapy. So I think that's super important, and you're seeing that, especially during this time. A lot of therapists have now offered those services. Um, and then I think when it comes to dating, video first is the way of the future. I mean, you're seeing that now. I think the beauty of online dating or just dating in general is everyone has like their preferences. And as a single, you may have 4 dating apps on your phone. It's not a winner take all industry, but I think what you'll see is video first will be this niche, and I believe will be the leader in that niche of online dating, given it's very efficient, authentic, and the product we put out is the best video first product on the market. So yeah, I mean, that's how I see it. I think people are more mindful dating nowadays, especially with the pandemic. They're more comfortable dating through video, and they're more mindful. They're more like open to jumping on a video chat because they want to see like, hey, is this someone I actually want to go out with? It's not like they're okay with kind of, I don't want to use this word, but like kind of like vetting it out. Like, hey, do I feel comfortable? Is this someone I could see myself with? And people are just more comfortable doing that versus just, okay, we swiped around each other, we messaged a little bit, we exchanged numbers, let's go out. And it's just not an efficient process. It's a broken process. So that's kind of how I see the future of online dating.
Right. Well, it makes sense to kind of expedite kind of the efficiency and just cut down on the time. Especially, I mean, you mentioned kind of is do you find that there's bigger segments of the population kind of using the app like in big cities such as New York?
Yeah. So our biggest cities are New York City, London is very big, San Francisco, LA. All the hubs are pretty large, and growing. And then the beauty with Matchmaker, and then we also run events though that are global. So if you're in a smaller city and you just want to date, you could also adjust your location. So if you're sheltering in place outside of New York, but you live in New York, you could change your location. Um, and we basically also have the matchmaker service. So if we don't have an event in your area, you could still get matched with these curated dates with people in your area. So I think that allows for smaller cities and people to continue to participate. And then we offer these like private events. So if a nonprofit wants to run an event, or any sort of religious organization, or any sort of brand organization, they could also create virtual events by contacting us.
Very cool. And you're saying so a lot of the actual interactions, like the dates, are kind of these like speed dates, like a few minutes.
Yeah, so the virtual events are speed dates. You get your dates, you could see them beforehand, blurred photos, we could see, learn about their fun facts, the icebreakers. Then like you may have a date at 7, you hop in, video chat. At the end, it asks you whether you like them or not. If it's a match, you're entered into a match, and then you go on to your next date. Same sort of thing. So it's fast, it gives you a number of dates, see how it goes, and then you could always, after the date, message one another or jump back on a video chat through Filter Off. And then for the matchmaker service, it basically puts you in a chat with someone. And it's up to you to set up a time with them to video date.
Okay. No, I
So
love,
bonus on the user.
yeah, I love the idea of kind of keeping with kind of the speed dating, but kind of having a 21st century sort of modern
Yeah.
version of that.
Yeah, it's like the intersection of offline and online dating. And that's what we've created. Like with these virtual events are kind of like speed dating events. And the matchmaking service is like you hire a matchmaker to help you. And it's the thing is though, it is uncomfortable for a lot of people to be on a speed dating event because they feel like they're being judged, like there's lots of people. And with Filter Off, it's you could be on your couch and there's no one judging you because it's one other person at a time. So it's you could be feel comfortable. So it kind of works for all sorts of people.
Right. No, I was using when I moved to Seattle a couple years ago, I used meetup.com to go. There was one group I was a part of, and I loved just being able to kind of rotate through people I was talking to. If there was a conversation that I just wasn't really into, I wasn't stuck with,
Yeah.
that interaction for an hour. There were so many people you could just kind of, go and until
You
you find
bounce
someone that you
around.
connect with.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. And then when you connect to them, then you could keep chatting for a while, or you could just exchange information, and then you could always hang out at a later date too. And that's kind of it's that premise of like, how do you? And that's something that people ask me a lot. It's like, well, what if someone else creates a video app tomorrow? We've been doing this for 2 years. There's like crazy workflows that just people haven't thought about. It's super hard to get two people to show up. People are super flaky, and there's these tremendous amount of scenarios of like, well, what if you're put into a room with someone you don't like each other? Just meet up in person when it's a big event, right? When it's a big event, you can kind of bounce around. So there's all these like in-person scenarios that people just don't think about, and it's very complex. And I mean, we've been thinking about this and tackling this problem for a while now. So
What's some of the feedback that you get from people who've, say maybe, gone through some of the other apps and not been a fan, but then they kind of, experience filter off? What are common things that you hear?
yeah, I mean, it's just right. It's the same type of thing. Is like I'm too busy for dating apps, and Filter Off is kind of like that the first app where I could just where I don't need to do the work. I just need to show up because Filter Off does the work for you. It's just dating made easy. So it's that sort of sentiment. Um, and like I said, it's just like Filter Off is an experience. People like our user told us they'll do their makeup before, or drink a glass of wine. We have an event coming up, a cannabis event, where people get literally high together. Um, so it really attracts all sorts of people, and we have these different sorts of events and niches, and it's I think it's just like a cool experience for whoever you are. And um, we've also had people that are older, right? Like that have been on these more traditional websites, and now they're using Filter Off. I spoke to a user, and he was like, yeah, I'm starting to see someone through your app. And like, that's awesome. We just had an engagement recently. So stuff like that, that's just super cool. And I'll actually share a story, because this is something people don't think about. Is there's a lot of communities that when they're on dating apps, they are really disadvantaged. And one of those communities is if you're, let's say you're disabled and you're wheelchair bound. And I don't want to say it's community, but like, unfortunately, let's say you're wheelchair bound. Unfortunately, people on dating apps oftentimes will swipe left because they see your wheelchair. And it's super unfortunate. And it's something that people don't think about. And unless you are wheelchair bound, you've never experienced that. And the beauty with Filter Off, like, so we had a user, he's like, it's the first time where I could be on a dating app and I can just be myself, because it's through video. They're not judging based off of like the picture. Of course, they can make their own assessment, but he's allowed to show his personality. And that's super important to us, is to help all sorts of communities, all sorts of people, whoever you are, whatever you're going through, that there's a place for you. And that's Filter Off is a very inclusive dating app. And we're adding more genders, so making super robust preferences. So like that's super important to us. So just important, I think a very important story to share, because it's something that people don't think about in when it comes to online dating.
Right, right. It just sounds like a healthier kind of process overall compared to, what we've sort of gotten used to now. I mean, take some apps like people don't even really read the bios, so it's almost purely based on, the pictures. And as I think you kind of alluded to, obviously, physical attraction is a big component in dating,
Mhm.
but when you actually get to interact with the person and sort of gauge their personality, I think that really adds a important and kind of necessary layer to it.
100%.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, you know, I think you mentioned a little bit, well, as far as kind of adding genders, and I think you mentioned adding games to the app. Are there any other sort of things going forward that you sort of see yourself kind of adding or
Yeah,
doing
I mean,
differently?
I think it's just to continue to improve our matchmaking service, continue to roll out more unique and diverse events, continue to build our partnerships. Um, and like I said, robust preferences. That's really on the roadmap, and games to make it more interactive. That's on the roadmap for the next 1 to 3 months. And then things change being a startup, and um, we learn about things based off our users. We get tons of emails every day of people, good things, bad things, but we learn from that. And there are opportunities for us to improve. And as you can see, we're pushing out like an update almost every week, sometimes twice a week. So we're constantly working on this. Like we're weekends, nights. So the three of us all have day jobs, and we're constantly working on this. We're really passionate about it. We really love it, and just trying to make the best um, online dating experience for people.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to switch gears again and talk a little about. I had seen that you did a TEDx event, a speech. Tell me a little, and I also found on your blog just you kind of wrote about the preparation for that. Can you tell me
Yeah.
a little about kind of preparing and then what kind of the content of your talk?
Yeah. So it was a TEDx event, um, and it was through my company. I work for Johnson & Johnson, and yeah, it was basically about like the premise. I was working. That was like when I was working on my nonprofit. Like I had just recently started it, and I was talking about the journey of just like I wasn't a mental health professional. I didn't have the credentials to start this, but like it was kind of that process and meeting people, and one thing led to the next and just kept going. And I could have stopped and made an excuse like I don't have this time, I don't have the money to start this, I'm not a mental health professional, maybe I have to go to school. But like I just kept going, and it's impacted thousands of people's lives now. And that was like the premise of the talk. Like I could have not done this, right? And it basically goes back to the individual and says I speak to the audience and I say and like think of the times when you have said no, or think of the times when you stopped yourself. um, so that was kind of the message I wanted to send. So it was mental health related, but it wasn't a mental health talk. That wasn't the premise. Like that wasn't the message I wanted to leave with people. So yeah, it was a really amazing experience. By far the scariest experience I've ever gone through. Basically 13 minutes of memorized content, no slides. And the preparation is intense. Like I had a coach um, who coaches very big people in business space. So it was just like an amazing experience and something um, I don't really want to do again. It was so it was so intense, but I'm so fortunate that I was able to do it, and I pushed myself to do it. And yeah, practice. It was insane practice. But yeah, every time I give that sort of talk, like it's scary, but it's such an incredible experience, and I'm just very happy I did it and I went through it.
That's super cool. Do people like, come up to you or ask questions, give you comments kind of after doing one of the talks like this?
Oh, I mean, after my TEDx, I mean, it was in front of like close to 3,000 people. It was like the amount of people that came over to me and they're like, listen, like I'm going through mental health issues. Like my brother, like people were just opening up, crying, wanting to give me hugs. Um, yeah, it was an experience I've never experienced before. And just like a very human experience, like at the most like fundamental level. It was just insane. And such a cool memory. And I'm very happy. Like my mom, my dad, my brother, and then one of my best friends, David, came to see. So it's super important. Happy I had them to be a part of it. So.
And that's almost sort of what I was thinking as far as it. I mean, I think it's one thing to hear, a TED Talk or TEDx talk from, someone who, a mental health professional, but then there's some distance, I feel like, when it gets to be someone who's just kind of talking about their story or, more kind of like the entrepreneurial stuff that you're doing. Um, I think I don't know if you think it kind of lends itself more to that kind of just human interaction. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's relatable for sure. I
yeah.
mean, I think it's important. Those people that are PhDs or sociologists or whatever you are, they're super important for what they do, and um, they make they help tremendous amount of people. And there's also people that are more like that are more business minded or looking at a different lens, looking at things in a different lens. And sometimes the two merge, right? Like sometimes it's you work hand in hand. Like I run a WhatsApp community with like mental health advocates, mental health influencers in the space when it comes. So a lot of them are psychiatrists, but they're also some are in government. Some also run other companies, nonprofits. So it's like this. It brings them all together, and I think it's unique to add diverse talents and diverse perspectives and um, whatever you're starting. So, but yeah, to go back to your question, yeah, I mean, it adds a little bit more relatability versus like, oh, I've been studying this for 7 years. Um, yeah, I went to Harvard and I put out all these papers. Yeah, I mean, it is like, whoa, like I'm never gonna get there because I'm not going to school for this. How can I create something? But yeah, so I think it adds that layer of relatability for sure.
Are there uh, like business, like sort of entrepreneurial opportunities that you see within like kind of the mental health sphere that you feel like haven't been tapped into yet that are kind of become, significant in the future?
I think it comes down to a lot about like accessibility, and I think we are still getting there. And we run 18%'s the largest real time chat mental health community in the world. So and I say real time chat because it's hard. Like real time chat is hard. Like forums, there's lots of forums, but that's very static. It doesn't have the same vibe and the feel of having a conversation. Um, and that's just real time. So I mean, I'm doing the thing that I enjoy the most, which is in this case building this community, supporting people, and making this kind of like hub. So we offer other, if you're looking for online therapy, we offer referral resources. Um, if you're looking, we also offer a course to get certified in peer-to-peer support. So like we offer these different resources. But yeah, I mean, but I think the kind of the values that we set for ourselves from like a business perspective are like accessibility, affordability. Yeah, so and then kind of community. So I think community is so important from a mental health aspect. Like a lot of times people are like, hey, I'm really struggling. And it's like, why are you struggling? And it's like, well, I'm I'm this way and my parents don't accept me. And it's like, no reason. No, of course you're struggling if your parents don't accept you. And that's why like you could take medication, but that's not the real reason why you're the reason you're struggling is because you're disconnected, you don't feel loved. And community is sometimes kind of the magic answer to a lot of things. um, so yeah, so I feel like
Yeah,
it's an
great.
opportunity to continue to expand upon.
Very cool. Well, Zach, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. And if people want to like find out more about, Filter Off, or 18% or just your other work and TED Talk, where would you direct them to?
Yeah, so Filter Off is available for iOS and Android. 18%. If you go to 18 and then percent spelled out.org, that's where you could sign up and join the Slack community or sign up for the newsletter as well. And then to learn more about me or get connected to me, I have a personal website, Zach Schleien. So ZachSchleien.com. And we could add that to the show notes and to learn more about me. So yeah, so pretty easy to find all those online. But yeah, it was a pleasure, and thanks so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. And for those of you who enjoyed the episode, go ahead and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're Roscoe's Wetsuit. And you can also find audio versions of the podcast available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our iHeartRadio, and now we're on Stitcher as well. So go ahead and check us out. Zach, again, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. So this is going to just be a quick little recap video of the episode I did with co-founder of Filter Off, Zach Schleien. So the biggest takeaways that I got with this interview, Zach was really kind of emphasizing, the importance of when in dating, kind of being able to actually see people, kind of with this video chat feature of their app that really distinguishes it from some of the other apps in the market, and the whole idea of doing these kind of speed dating events is also something that I feel like is something cool and different that he's doing to kind of differentiate himself and his company from the rest. As far as the mental health side of things that we talked about, I think it's awesome what Zach does, and really is the epitome of some an entrepreneur who's able to also be in this mental health space, even though he's not a clinician, a researcher. He's an entrepreneur, yet is getting big platforms to speak, doing TEDx talks, and speaking to other people about these really important concepts, despite him not being a clinician or a trained scientist or doctor himself. So those were some of the biggest takeaways I got.